This is called Eve of Easter. Milton, who made his illiterate daughters read to him in 5 languages, till they heard the news he would marry again, and said they'd rather hear he was dead. Milton, who turns even Paradise Lost into an autobiography. I have 3 babies tonight, all 3 are sleeping. Rachel, the great-great-great-granddaughter of Herman Melville, is asleep on the bed. Sophia and Marie are sleeping. Sophia, namesake of the wives of Louis Friedson, the scholar, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Marie, my mother's oldest name. These 3 girls, resting in the dark. I made the lucent dark. I stole images from Milton to cure opacous gloom, to render the room an orb beneath this raucous moon of March, eclipsed only in daylight, heavy-breathing baby bodies, daughters and descendants in the presence of the great ones, Milton and Melville and Hawthorne. Everyone is speaking at once. I only looked at them, all blended, each half Semitic, of a race always at war. The rest of their inherited grace from among Nordics, Germans, and English, writers at peace, rushing warring Jews into democracy, when actually peace is at the window begging entrance, with the hordes in the midst of air too cold for this time of year. Eve of Easter and the shocking resurrection idea. Someone baby stirs now, hungry for an egg. It's the Melville baby going to make a fuss. The Melville one sucking her fingers for solace. She makes a squealing noise. Hawthorne baby still deeply asleep. The one like my mother out like a light. The Melville one, though the smallest, wants the most because she doesn't really live here. Hawthorne will want to be nursed when she gets up. Melville sucked a bit and dozed back off. Now Hawthorne is moving around. She's the most hungry, yet perhaps the most seduced by darkness in the room. I can hear Hawthorne. I know she's awake now. But will she stir, disturbing the placid sleep of Melville and insisting on waking us all? Meanwhile, the rest of the people of Lenox drive up and down the street. Now Hawthorne wants to eat. They all see the light by which I write. Hawthorne sighs. The house is quiet. I hear Melville's toy. I've never changed the diaper of a boy. I think I'll go get Hawthorne and nurse her for the pleasure of cutting through the darkness before the noise of measure stimulates the boys. I'll cook a fish, retain poise in the presence of heady descendants. Stone-willed, their fathers look at me and drink ink. I return a look to all the daughters, and I wink. Eve of Easter, I've inherited this peaceful sleep of the children of men. Rachel, Sophia, Marie, and again me, Bernadette. All heart I live, all head, all eye, all ear. I lost the prejudice of paradise and wound up caring for the babies of these guys.
Yay. Wow, thank you all so much for being here. I'm Lainey Brown, and I'm so happy to have gathered an amazing group of beloveds, friends, family, students of Bernadette Mayer's to celebrate her life and her work tonight. I wanted to just first say a big thank you to Kelly Writers House and everybody here who worked so hard to make this happen, and also the Department of Creative Writing sponsoring this, and especially thanks to Jessica Lowenthal and Julia Block. Yay. And also immediately following the program, there will be a reception that will be delicious, so please stay and join us. I'm going to read really short excerpts of the bios of our amazing guests tonight, but I want to encourage everybody to explore their work, just to have maximum time for presentation. I'll read them in the order that the speakers will come up, and then I have just some remarks, and then I'll call the first person up. So we have tonight Julia Block, whose most recent book of poetry is The Sacramento of Desire from Sidebrow Books. Her scholarly book on race, gender, lyric, and the long poem is forthcoming in 2024 from University of Iowa Press, and we are so lucky to have her here as Director of Creative Writing. Emily Rush is a local Penn alum who spent a summer interning with Bernadette at her home. They currently spend their days as a preschool teacher and their nights as a poet, artist, thinker of thoughts. Julie Levitan is also a Penn alum who spent the same summer living with Bernadette. She is a doctoral student in clinical psychology and lives in North Carolina with her cat, Skinky. Lee Ann Brown has published 7 books of poetry, the most recent being Oh, You Nameless and Unnamed Ridges, a collaboration with Bernadette Mayer. She founded Tender Buttons Press, an independent publishing house for experimental feminist poetry, beginning with Bernadette Mayer's sonnets. In the mid-90s, Brenda Coultas moved to New York City to work on the staff of the Poetry Project. Her books include A Handmade Museum, The Marvelous Bones of Time, The Tatters, and The Writing of an Hour. Max Warsh is an artist and curator who lives and works in New York City. He is director of Ye Art Gallery at St. John's University and co-director of the estate of Rosemary Mayer. His artwork has been included in exhibitions at the Queens Museum, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, as well as many international venues. Marie Warsh is a historian, writer, and the co-director of the estate of Rosemary Mayer. She helped to organize numerous exhibitions of Mayer's work and has edited several books, including excerpts from the 1971 Journal of Rosemary Mayer, 2016 and 2020, Temporary Monuments, work by Rosemary Mayer, 1977 and 1982, with Max Warsh in 2018, and The Letters of Bernadette and Rosemary Mayer, 2022. She is the author of Central Park's Adventure-Style Playgrounds, Renewal of a Mid-Century Legacy. Phil Good, the partner of Bernadette Mayer for decades, wrote a collaboration with Mayer entitled Subatomic Moss, published by Vehicle Editions in 2021. He is also the author of Poets in a Box, published by Reality Beach in 2018. He lives upstate New York, near what he calls the Poetry Forest. Bernadette Mayer needs no introduction. Still, I'm inclined to say a few words about how her revolutionary, utopian, hilarious, intimate writing changed the landscape of contemporary poetry happily, for us irrevocably. Mayer, a second-generation New York School poet, created more than 30 books of poetry and prose, reinvented poetic forms such as sonnets, letters, and journals, and created several time-based durational writing projects. And she is also known for her radical generosity as a teacher and community organizer. I experienced this generosity firsthand when I arrived in New York City as a young writer in the early 90s and found in Bernadette a remarkable friend and mentor, a home for poetry always open, a long wooden table covered with flowers, poems, and collaborations. I was amazed also by her ability to hear and amplify what was striking and authentically good in any poet's work, a voracious appetite for learning, a generative and contagious encouragement which she shared lavishly. Bernadette is the poet who made a life in poetry possible for myself and for so many. It's impossible to express all the ways that Bernadette Mayer's work is necessary and enlivening. We cannot experience her work and remain unchanged. What to say to amplify her writing for any who've not yet been initiated? The first thing that comes to mind is love. Not simply because love is never simple, and yet love is always the impetus, even when irreverent or angry or ludicrous. What is underneath is always love, and a reaction that when it is not there, when humans ignore our world or ignore the presence of another person as human, as important, what happens in her poems is a complaint which urges a return to love and the many forms of love, from the erotics of language itself to the love for every species and flower as a form of attention, as an experiment in the maximizing of love, with sharp humor and brilliance, and with a welcome which continually opens. I'm going to read a letter that Bernadette wrote to me, and an opening and closing of a letter, and just a couple short poems from Works and Days. And then, just to repeat the order again, next will be Julia Block, Emily Rush, Julie Levitan, Leanne Brown, Brenda Coultas, Max Warsh, Marie Warsh, and Phil Good. All right. Dear Lainey Leanne Margaret Barrett, this is a letter saying, I am pregnant with you. No, but I'm not. I'm saying that more mail is to follow. So maybe that's as anticipatory as birth. I'm having you send a review copy of Studying Hunger Journals. Here, though, it's finally spring. It's an overcast, dusty, warm day, and I can write you a letter from my favorite writing spot, the back porch, where there is a wasp, but not a yellow jacket yet. It's too early for them. The skunk cabbages are putting up their surly heads, poking a little late through the ground, a harbinger of the really great early spring garden I have by the Kinderhook Creek. Soon the trout lilies, bloodroots, and periwinkles. Down there we found last year the chrysalis of a luna moth. Here we are on the edge of what they now call the Rensselaer Plateau, which means to the south, crookedly. It's all uncultivated land. That's why I get to see so many creatures here. It's amazing that after all the incarnations of this land, including its present ones, the new Lebanon Speedway, there's still this corridor left, and that I wind up lighting on it. But maybe I gravitated toward it so I could write about it. I have two questions for you. I feel that as poets, if we need to, we should be paid for our work. I've been having this battle for years. The question is, how shall I proceed? And if I have the chance, how best to help other poets in the U.S.? My other question has to do with digital technology. How to create a book based on those ideas? Well, that might keep you busy at least till the Studying Hunger Journals arrive. Thinking of you and your mailbox, I remain your friend, Bernadette. And then this one, I'm just going to read the opening and closing because they're so memorable in Bernadette's letters. All written on a typewriter. From B. Mayer, a laughter, a daughter. To L. Brown, a laughter, daughter, another. Subject, laughterhood. The signature reads, Toodaloo and love and kisses, Berna chives, Shotio, ethoso, shoot. P.S. Near Bethlehem, mud and debris fell into the Norman Skill and stopped the flow of the creek. God's a little freak. Walking like a robin. Take 3 or 4 steps, then stop. Smell, taste, touch, and hear. Is there anything to eat? Oh, look, there's some caviar. It must be my birthday. Thanks. I must be very old, like 70. I guess I'm falling apart. I'll just sew myself back together, but will it last? Please take a piece of me back home. Each piece is anti-war, and don't pay your rent. In fact, remember, property is robbery. Give everybody everything. Other birds walk this way too. I am a coyote. On the go, I'll fool you. Into thinking you're one too. Who's to say I can't do it? I am proactive, ephemeral, epiphytic residue. I don't mean to get all parallel university on you, but I am at once the spider web, and me observing them. Thank you. And Julia Block will be our next reader.
Thanks, Lainey. It's really an honor to be part of tonight's event. So I wrote a piece called Bernadette's Questions. Elizabeth Willis first introduced me to Bernadette Mayer's book, Midwinter Day. And then later, when I was a grad student, Bob Perlman and Rachel Blau Duplessis suggested that I take the train up to upstate New York to interview Bernadette, which I thought was a crazy idea, but I did it anyway. And then Leanne Brown was kind enough to give me a ride from the train station in Albany. So I sat just incredibly intimidated in that back porch asking Bernadette about the long poem and the lyric and motherhood. I was reading Midwinter Day, and I was also reading a piece Bernadette wrote called 20 Questions About Form or New Forms. Here are 4 of those questions. Does anyone know what the form of a poem is? What is the form of a past poem we agree to admire? What is the form of a modern poem we agree has changed the world? What do you want to find out? I was not very good at asking questions in my interview. I recorded and transcribed the interview, and then I shoved it into a drawer because I was so embarrassed by my grad student questions. I mean, my questions were so boring and deadening. And Bernadette's answers are wonderful because she was very good at asking questions. She co-wrote this other book called The Art of Science Writing, and there's a section in it on giving a mock test. Here is part of that test. How do you imagine life got started on this earth? How did humans evolve from earlier forms of life? What is your opinion of the light in this room? What would you rather be doing now instead of answering these questions? It's a test that has nothing to do with facts or data or information. It goes slant. It's like 2 of those questions from that other list of questions about form. Does anybody know what the form of a poem is? What do you want to find out? I wouldn't be the poet I am without Bernadette, but I also wouldn't be the teacher I am without Bernadette. And now I'm beginning to think I wouldn't be the parent I am either. I was thinking about her recently when I was up before dawn with my 3-year-old. We were killing time before the sun came up, and we made a shopping list. So here is a little transcription of some of the requests. Dried mangoes, lemons, cheese, cucumber, lighthouse costume, dumpster, stethoscope, teeny tiny doll baby, jump rope, toy sun, real sun, spider dumpster, play jar. And I've also become one of those writers who takes note of what their kid asks, the questions that they ask. So here are some recent questions which also made me think of Bernadette's test. Do squirrels have paws? Why do they have paws? Are lions our friends? Who built me? Did you know that I put a ghost web on top of my dog? Can you drive? Can you drive the car now? Can you drive the vehicle? Are the owls awake? Why are they nocturnal? Is that a real ghost? Does anybody know what the form of a poem is? What do you want to find out? So I've decided the interview that I did with Bernadette Mayer should finally be shared. So here we go. This is from November 2006. Julia. So tell me your thoughts on the long poem. Why are you drawn to it? Bernadette. Why am I drawn to it? I don't know. I remember reading when I was a kid, reading Edgar Allan Poe's theory that a poem could only be written in one sitting. So, I, being a contrary type of person, no, I just like the idea of going on forever. Julia, what do you like about it? Bernadette, I don't know. It's fun. It's more interesting, I think. The problem is getting people to read it, I find. I always loved reading long works. Clark and I told this story once, and whoever I told it to loved it. We had this reading series at some gallery, and we were trying to read so long that we would get the audience to leave in anger or in boredom. And it never worked, because when you read a really long work, people would stay and think, wow, I have to stay for this. This is an event, something to tell about later. I was at that 4.5-hour reading. I just really like really long works. I always like them. Julia, you also work in really short forms. How do you manage to master so many different lengths? Bernadette, that's my job. I'm a poet. Bernadette, I'll tell you something interesting about Midwinter Day. It seemed like the kind of book that was already there. Do you ever get that feeling as a writer that you're tracing the letters that were already there? And I felt like it was all already there, and I was just writing it. I was just tracing it. And then one more answer that I'll share with you tonight. Well, here's my new theory about poetry, which I've tried to tell my students too. You take a prose sentence that's been floating around in your head, just an ordinary one, like, I've never had any self-esteem, and you turn it into poetry. Like, we had a bird in our wood stove. That was the first time I did this. And it was a grackle. When we got it out of the stove, it was a grackle. The poem was, in June, the wood stove sings like a bird. And that was the first time I did that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily. First, hi, Al. Al actually introduced me to Bernadette. He had her here as a fellow in his fellows seminar. At the beginning of class, he said, I was talking to Bernadette earlier and Phil, and they decided they would want to have one of you come and stay with them this summer. And I immediately was like, oh, me, like, I'm going to do that. So I sat through the entire class, like, kind of like, I got to tell them, I got to get there first. But Julie got there first, actually. Yeah, and then they had us both come and stay for, I think, 8 or 9 weeks or so, doing various tasks and responsibilities. Julie will talk a bit more about that. And then I went back and stayed for a few weeks the next summer as well. And got to know Bernadette and Phil, pretty well. And it was definitely a very unique experience that I'm very grateful for. And I'm really grateful to be up here talking to all of you. But mostly I'm just excited to sit and listen to other people share their remembrances and share her work. And I just have one poem to share with you all. And the only way that I could find it, I have the book, it's from Utopia, but I couldn't find it, was from a cross-stitch like needlepoint that I made of it. So pardon if I have to like zoom in a little. It's called Epilogue. Here's a utopia, which is more a clue than a place or book at which you'll look. You haven't given up on a world, have you? You know, traditional utopias are no place as ours will ever be. We were all the same and remain in any name. Here is some utopia, some and everything. Add all you would to what is already here. Together we will put things on paper that have never been there. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie. Oh, I have some things to share. Is there... could you go to the first one? I don't know what order they're in. You can just flip through. We're going to do a little preview. Keep flipping. Oh, okay. That's a fun one. Okay, well, okay, the one I'm starting with, I'm just going to read it to you. But yeah, as Emily said, we had the great pleasure of hanging out in Bernadette's attic for a summer in 2018. So the first thing I'm going to read is something that it's a poem that Bernadette loved and that I affectionately refer to as the theme poem of the summer of 2018. Moss-covered paths between scarlet peonies, pale jade mountains fill your rustic windows. I envy you, drunk with flowers, butterflies swirling in your dreams. So Emily and I got there on June 11th, so the peonies were blooming. Interestingly, Mark Maron was over for dinner, which was a little weird, but it was a weird day overall. And kind of from the first moment we got there, I was very somewhat compulsively documenting things. I was like taking these really wonky videos and audio recordings. And one of the earliest ones that I found when I started looking through all the footage I collected that summer is a close-up of these beautiful pink and scarlet peonies that a neighbor had brought over. And in the background, you can hear Bernadette brainstorming what the heck she was going to do with two assistants, two 20-something people living upstairs in her attic for the summer. And her first task for us was to sew her a dress out of peonies, or perhaps a peony blanket to lay upon. So we got started on that right away. But my main duties that summer were to sit on the porch, Bernadette rocking, Emily reading a book, me usually laid out on the floor of the porch for some reason, and talk. We also went on a lot of working lunches. But at some point, I decided to start digging through her archives. I started with some boxes. Flip through again. One more. This one. So I started with some of the boxes that had not been yet sent to Bernadette's archive, which is held at the University of California, San Diego. And this process included me, again, on the floor of the porch, which I don't think is like archivist-approved place to be looking at someone's material. I don't think it's recommended to put rocks on it so that it works aesthetically in your picture. But there I was, and Bernadette was very supportive of this process. And I just wanted to share this one with, first of all, showing Bernadette's process of typing her notes on the typewriter and then cutting them out and then leaving more notes in that loopy penmanship. And this poetic area is very spacious, has room for all, has many mansions. But at some point, after sifting through the archives that were still at the house, Bernadette and I decided, with the help of Marie, that I would go to the University of California, San Diego on a rescue mission for some previously unpublished materials to then bring back to Bernadette so she could decide and work through those. And some of those works were published in Milkweed Smithereens, which came out last year. So I wanted to share some of the things from that trip to the archive that I find myself coming back to a lot. You can flip through. We're just going to talk about them. So I have always loved the poem-like things, and there's an entire folder and series of folders in the archive titled Poem-like Things. And I appreciated that Julia read a shopping list because so many of them are grocery lists in the kind of loopy penmanship that Bernadette could no longer do after the stroke. And this bit of letter that was never sent, presumably. Dear Hannah, don't be cruel. These little scraps of paper for some failed collaboration or partial collaboration, failed experiments. And as I was reflecting on what I wanted to say tonight, I think one of the things I come back to with the poem-like things is that Bernadette is so well known for making the minutia and all of the little bits of daily life and presenting that as poetry, bringing it into the work, lifting it up in that way. But it was something else entirely to sift through that residue of her life and to actually read those grocery lists and appreciate them as just as precious as the lines of text that are published in books. But the thing that was the most special was being able to then go back to upstate New York and ask her about it. So if you flip, this is a drawing from a children's book that Grace and Bernadette were working on. It has a lot of tops and carrots going on. So here the carrot has become a top. And then if you'll go to the last one, or maybe it was the first one, I'll land on this one. People's love of emergencies, I can understand. I can also understand the wish to imitate the style, the love, the handwriting of these others. I'd tell anything to anybody, don't you understand? And I will always cherish being able to go back and ask Bernadette and have her tell me anything, often not the answer to what I asked, but anything that came to mind. And there were too many Bernadette-isms to list in these remarks of things that she said during that summer and afterwards that I will carry with me always. But I'm so grateful to have this record, this palimpsest of archives to go back to and remember her. And I'm so grateful to have had time to meet the person, the whole complicated, messy person behind these poems that I love so dearly. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me too. I'm Leanne Brown. I met Bernadette in 1985. I went to Naropa to study with her after reading Midwinter Day at Brown University, where I was an undergrad. And then I went to New College of California for a semester on my year off from undergrad because I knew she would be teaching there. She was only there for a week, but I just went there she was teaching about Whitman. And so I surprised her by being there. And then I moved to New York, and we were very close. And I feel like I'm just going to mostly read some work of hers because there's too much for me to say, and I hope I can write more of it down for you. But I just feel like if I were Bernadette, I would just say, I'm going to fall down now because I can't feel very overwhelmed by the fullness of her and in me and in everybody in the community that she gave to all of us, this great web. I love that she said, read the Steins, which she means Einstein, Wittgenstein, and Gertrude Stein. So I did a bibliomancy in stanzas of meditation, which she mentioned on one of the recordings that Kelly Writer's House has up, through ModPo, in the close listening talk with Charles Bernstein in 2007, where she specifically said she read stanzas in meditation. So I just opened it and it says, I come back to think everything of one and one, or not which they were one. I won. And the other one was, secretly they met again. All which is changed is made, they may be merry. So I thought that was a message for us to be married together. And then I wanted to read a little bit from sonnets, which she gave me the great gift of publishing for her. I'll just read a few of my favorites. Sonnet. Everyone makes love to their bereft and go. I'd like to know you right this second, but you wouldn't dare come here for the fear I have of eating this open sandwich I've got. I forget, and you've got to, I forget, and not copy tomorrow the two identical different Dutch paintings will not look the fruits the way they look today. Thinking of you as if at the beginning of something I do, I will not lie down. You act as if you were married, thee who comes by whenever you please. I'm not either. You called early, a lot to say, I forget the plot. It was, we are alike now, it's late, you're asleep, I'm awake. And this one I'm very fond of because the third stanza, I remember her showing me how she thought the stanza wasn't working. So she like just drew lines down through the stanza and then took the first chunk of words and made it the first line, the second chunk, the second line. So you'll hear that wild syntax in the third stanza. But it's got a lot going on in it. But the title is Clap Hands, which is named after, I think, a Tom Waits song, but also it's like clap, it's almost like celebratory biblical clap hands and joy with joy, but it's a reference to that song too, because he was around the Poetry Project. There's all kinds of things, but anyway, I'll write you sonnets till you come home from school again. The music of your cave become a stalagmitic presence, honey. I don't have an electronically regulated discharge tube that can emit extremely rapid, brief, and brilliant flashes of light. Such a squinting and twisting around as to disorder. It's nice to divide a sonnet this way when you might fuck me up the ass on account of the presence of the bureau by the door, 'cause of some song like the one by Tom Verlaine, where he says adieu like a kid from Brooklyn. Tell like so, 'cause me, Bill, loves you to not to know. Turn the here to why over Bill, me, 'cause I'll know I you say and am to exist. I not entranced pretty. Can't Bill with startling say Shakespeare myself that? Couplet, I adore you. It's my habit. I want manly things and should not women come to me. So that's like, to me, like one of the things she said about writing this book was like it's a love poem to everybody, to every gender and sex and her zip code, everybody that she wanted to make love with. I mean, like, it's very, very personal, but it's also very visionary. Like Marilyn Hacker had written her book of sonnets about one particular young woman, and then Bernadette's writing about everyone, like she goes further. And then the other one I want to read is one that just, I love when people are writing about what they see in these works. And Sophie Robinson just wrote a beautiful, Substack post called Turn about Volta, the Volta in this poem. And she also pointed out how she's doing both a Petrarchan sonnet and an Elizabethan sonnet at the same time, because she does the 8 lines and then she has a division, a Volta, then the 6, but there's a couplet. Those last 2 lines are a couplet. So she's innovating that form yet again. So sonnet, we are ordinary. Come here. And Sophie says, come here is the most sexy kind of word in the English language, like come here. Sonnet, we are ordinary. Come here. Excerpts, I love you, from abstracts. So what? Who cares? Songs of one, an experience of this is a case like whole, and I am not from there. I write to you to say I know nothing as ever, no rhyming, no everything there is, no proceeding, no thinking. You will be my, what will you be? And that is the end. Except for the instance, what are you wearing? Why aren't you here? Where'd you put the window? Come here, tell me the rest of it. So the last one I wanted to read, I just wanted to mention the great, the Bernadette Mayer list of experiments that I hope everybody knows. If you don't, just Google Bernadette Mayer list of experiments, and I've just begun to do those experiments. But I love how she would generate new experiments when she would find a new work. And she would you could do reverse engineering on a lot of them and say, oh, she must have read that and then made that experiment. But there's a great version of it at the Kelly Writers House ModPo site. But I just love that let me just say the one that I was thinking of, that people were talking about. She always talked about, will poetry change the world? That was one of her great questions that she would say over and over again in the middle of the night. Attempt to write a poem or series of poems that will change the world. So that's your assignment. Does everything written or dreamed of do this? She asks. So please check out her list of experiments. So the last thing I'm going to do is read one poem from this collaboration that was mentioned by Lainey at the beginning, which was a great gift to me, that she wrote this with me the beginning of the pandemic. And I also want to thank Phil for typing a lot of them and getting on the email and helping birth this collaboration, which is a lot about the difference and similarities of letters and poems, sort of back and forth. But I want to read one of her last poems in this book. I guess it is her last one. And I had written this long poem, and we talked today about how she exaggerated a lot. So there's an exaggeration in here. There's a lot of reverberation with some things we talked about today, like there's that bird, that robin shows up that you read, that great poem. And there's also the word here. There's also the word ballad. So she's always prefiguring certain things, but there's always totally new. So this is her remix of one of my poems in a way. I said, what did you do? And she was like, so she explains that. Okay, a slippery layout. It's so close to you. Don't close the door. So close to me or you, cardinal, blue jay, dandelion, and now the goldfinch shows up. At last, did you, the would-be poet, or are you the red-breasted or the goldfinch? I don't want these lines to get too long. Whenever they get really long, we'd write about fairgrounds. But the fairgrounds are here, not there. On the other hand, a line can be very long if it wants of still short. Here, there's dandelions, but no mowing. And when the birds light down into the grass, they're gone. And the lines went thus. Since your poem was 17 pages long, I don't know what to do. So I made an interim poem of the end words. Then I took them all and wrote with them, so some got in, slithering like birds in grass. There could be words in there. You never see 'em. We don't do ballads up north. What's halfway between here and there? Between? There is a place from which I can fly, at least when the sun comes out, underdone. To smoke a fish, there are buds. Uh-oh, flying dandelions for breakfast. Will you join me? Thank you.
Hey. I'm Brenda Coultas. Hey. I'm going to read just a piece that I wrote for the Poetry Project newsletter, and then I'll read 2 short poems. B.M. On her summer writing desk is a blue electric typewriter. The brand is Cornet. Yellow paper scrolled inside the carriage, opened letters, a short stack of books, including one by Dashiell Hammett, and 4 large bird feathers, probably from the wild turkeys with their chicks who paraded in the pasture all fall. She thought it was hilarious that her initials were B.M. I like to imagine that if I had gone to high school with Bernadette, like Peggy DeCourcy and Grace Murphy did, I could have been mentioned in her long works like Studying Hunger, Memory, and Utopia. When I saw Grace this fall, we drank white wine and talked. She's got a great story to tell me about the wedding of Bernadette and Louis that features a heavily pregnant with Marie, Bernadette, and an uptight country priest. Instinct tells me that there is and are biographers for Bernadette already born. On the day she came home from the hospital, Marie, Phil, and I were sitting with her on the porch when a box of the newly published The Letters of Rosemary and Bernadette Mayer, 1976 to 1980, arrived. Later, when we were alone, I asked her if she was still writing. She said no, and I asked, is that a frustration or a relief? She said, a relief. Bernadette was willing to drive with Phil 1,600 miles in a Jeep in July heat to my wedding, even though she disapproved of marriage. Phil and Bernadette spent the night in our apartment, and the memoir Another Night in Suck City by Nick Flynn lay next to the bed. She got a kick out of that and afterwards kept calling New York City Suck City. I think her dislike of New York City is legendary. Are you okay? And right after I saw it, I saw a look pass over her face, and I said, "Thank you, Bernadette, for not pointing out how stupid that question was." She could have crushed me, because of course nothing was okay. During the pandemic, we arranged East Village drop-offs to Phil and Bernadette in parking lots around the Hudson Valley in 3-degree weather. Venero's Italian cheesecake, Johann Schimmel's knishes, and Russ and Daughter's delicacies. She mailed me an envelope of broken Easter egg shells, trolling me after I wrote in a poem that, quote, "I know Bernadette is alive because she leaves eggshells on her desk," end quote. In November, we watched Northern Exposure on an 80s TV show set in Alaska on videotape. In December, we watched Time After Time, a movie about E.J. Wells in his time machine pursuing Jack the Ripper to then 80s San Francisco. A sonnet by Bernadette and Phil, typed up on yellow paper and signed with a golden thumbprint. My Turtle Island edition of Midwinter Day, the spine cracked from 2 decades of readings. The back cover fell off this December 21st at the marathon reading at Torn Page Parlor. It's signed, and the B and the M are merged and look to me like an elaborate garden gate. And a couple of poems from I think it's a New York anthology of poetry, the one that I may have the title slightly off. It's the one edited by Ron Padgett and Dave Shapiro. The Port. We told them the myths about others, sitting around the old and stately ship and the ship's table which had shipped from some faraway port. The steward came to call for the mail, hoping for a word from a nearby port. But like the wine we had drunk too soon, our hearts were with the ship, where after all our table had been set. Part of our attention was placed on the storm which flailed us about as if rain could outweigh the presence of others. And the old devotion of the captain's address, the captain preferred ancient modes of opening to those that were short, and had intercepted the steward's letter. In the course of his own first address, abbreviated with praise for the ship's company, he accused us of being old and drunk, and of growing mustaches which caught in the salt of the sea we were sailing, if only we could leave the port. America. As for me, when I saw you, you were in a tale, perhaps thinking perhaps love is coming too in America, or perhaps as what is belated in a tale may come true. The scene is simply describing its use. You had no hope but the length of days as in the sky, about which I already knew. This gentle information comes as a prescription. To notice a friend who is lettering a cloud which otherwise falls indifferently is no mark of distinction. This is the difference between the past and dreams, to dismiss an effigy which appears to be singing. Thank you, Bernadette.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Lainey, for organizing this. I think what I'm about to read falls in the category of poem-like things that Julie referenced, and I think Julia in the beginning also referenced a great list, so I think this will be hopefully a nice addition to those lists as well. So growing up in our family, we had a great tradition of making a birthday list, and we still make these lists now. And our mom, Bernadette, was really the master of the birthday list. And they ranged from the very practical, what would I like for my birthday, to the completely outlandish and impractical things that would never be achievable to ever attain in any lifetime. But, that's what makes these lists so special. And I've been kind of looking over these lists and just thinking about them a lot in the last year or so. So I thought it would be nice to share them with everyone. I mean, I made a selection here of about 11 of them from they're very short, but the years 2005 to 2022. So I'm going to read those. And there's some repetition, as you might imagine. And all right. 2005, books by William Kennedy, The Letters of James Schuyler, Snowshoes, Bath Salts and Oils, Great Stamps like the Cloud Stamps, Maitake Mushroom Extract Beta Glucan, a bottle of Fernet Branca, a case of Saint Emilion, 100% cotton vest, long flannel nightgown, suspenders, ranunculus seeds, chervil, nasturtium, and lovage plants, passion flower seeds, a tiller, pumpkin seeds, a Caravaggio, a golf cart, a tube of almond paste, a Mark Toby. 2006, tricycle for grown-ups. Foie gras, silk socks, digital camera, health insurance for Phil, silk scarf, copper shirt, all cotton long sleeve, long nightgown, pot holders, 2 copper bowls for Hector, light silk jacket, yellow note paper and envelopes, copper bodysuit. 2007, golf cart or small car, mobile air conditioner, spear for picking up trash, $4,000, no, $14,000, a 22-room house, walking distance to swamp, new water shoes, size men's 8.5 or 9, many ribbons, hippie clothes, recipe for mousseline, lifetime supply of birdseed, black sunflower, computer that responds to my thoughts, an Alpha Smart, house painters, a sign, no motorized vehicles. 2008, bird feeders, espresso machine, Zippo lighter, candles, a guaranteed annual income of $10,000, a guaranteed annual supply of champagne and oysters, 2 train tickets to Skagway and Haines, Alaska from Canada, Atlas of the World, black silk underwear, a case of Saint Emilion, books, The Invention of Everything Else by Samantha Hunt, Trout Are Made of Trees by Sayre and Endel. 2009. Oceans, an Illustrated Atlas by Earl and Glover, The History of Women in the World by Marilyn French, Feminist Press, 4 volumes. Mini Cuisinart, golf cart. Edwin Teal's 4 volumes on the seasons, House in Costa Rica or Canary Islands, Trip to the Nazca Lines in Peru, black silk underwear. 2011. Books, The Shamans of Prehistory by Dr. David Lewis Williams and Dr. Klotz, Indiana, Indiana by Laird Hunt, I Am You by Ann Tardos, Mutual Aid by Pyotr Kropotkin, Pym by Matt Johnson, Powdered Cheddar Cheese, Annie's Ancestral Paprika, Argonaut Oil, a case of Amontillado, a case of Saint Emilion, black oil sunflower seed for birds, a salt lick, sunflower seeds for flowers for humans, corms for ranunculus, hardy strawberry plants, a rose bush, a blueberry bush, a fig tree, Merrill's amphibious sandals, size 8.5 men's, galoshes, a bellows, a dictionary stand, a bamboo fishing pole with hook and line, Persian blue long sleeve all cotton turtleneck. 2013, books, The Cave Bear story by Bjorn Kurten, books by Eduardo Galeano, Ginkgo, the Tree That Time Forgot by Peter Crane, Joy of Cooking, Gold Stamp Pad, lapis lazuli necklace, double boiler, ground hazelnuts. 2014, Grannies for Peace membership. Dark green turtleneck, Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, dragonfly stickers, swimming pool, indoor or outdoor, anarchist anthology, An Army of Lovers by Juliana Spar and David Buch, Anna Patova Crosses a Bridge by Renee Gladman, an Ernst Haeckel book, The Field Guide to Darning Needles, Dragonflies, The Field Guide to Rocks and Minerals, The Field Guide to Shells. 2016, Ranunculus Encased in Amber, Lapis Lazuli Necklace, Peony Shirt Sewn with Vines, Lifetime Supply of Lightning, Complete Works of David Attenborough, DVDs, Complete Works of Rebecca Solnit, books, a terrarium, artificial hops vines, seeds for bells of Ireland, multicolored candles, anything blue, Persian. 2019, analog watch, tablecloths for 60 by 42 oblong table, Celtic sea salt or any coarse salt not in a grater, teapot for loose tea, berets, toaster oven, hops, shoehorn, hippie clothing. 2022, caviar, fruit tarts, strawberry shortcake, strawberry and violet shortcake, fruit tower, kiwi avocado green celebration, ginger lemon sorbets, aloe vera plant, tea sandwiches, custard pie, almond cake, key lime pie, petit four, dark chocolate bar, lemon meringue pie, carpaccio. Thank you.
That was amazing, Max. Thank you. And thanks so much, Lainey, for organizing this. It's really great to be here. Phil and Bernadette would talk about coming here all the time. So it's really great to finally hear about and be at the Kelly Writer's House. I'm going to read just a draft of an essay that I've been thinking about for a long time and then somewhat hastily put together for this occasion. And it's tentatively titled Mom in Antarctica. During the summer of 1998, I was struggling a bit. I didn't have enough to do, and I remember not knowing what to do, and I didn't have any money. I was 22, and it was very hot, with day after day of humid 80-degree weather. I was complaining about my plight to Mom, and she had a solution. I should read books about Antarctic exploration. A typical motherly advice. Reading about the harrowing journeys of these early 20th century explorers in the icy polar darkness would be a way, she thought, to cool off and to divert myself. So at her suggestion, I embarked on a sort of marathon of the classic literature on Antarctic exploration. I read about the legendary journey of Ernest Shackleton and his crew, whose ship got stuck in the ice and then was destroyed by it, and to save themselves, they traveled hundreds of miles through the treacherous waters of the southernmost Atlantic in a small open boat. I also read about Admiral Richard E. Byrd's attempt to live alone in Antarctica for 6 months for the purpose of collecting data on the weather and also to ponder the experience of deep isolation, which was going well until he started to become poisoned by the fumes from a stove in his hut and had to be rescued. This book is called Alone. And then one of the best book titles ever, and one of Bernadette's favorites, The Worst Journey in the World, written by Apsley Cherry Gerard about a harrowing journey during the winter of 1911 to try and secure an unhatched egg of an emperor penguin for use in scientific study in total darkness and blizzard conditions. So this is what Mom recommended for me. Tales of survival in the harshest conditions as a way to survive my early 20s in a hot Brooklyn apartment. And it really worked. This focus became sort of famous among my group of friends at the time. My friend Maria, who I met during this Antarctic summer, still talks about this 25 years later. My boyfriend at the time, who was in a band, even wrote a song about it, which I think was called Ice. And this whole experience of reading all of these books led me in all sorts of directions that I'm still thinking about today. And I was remembering this summer and Mom's influence on it soon after she died last year, when I was asked to help with a challenging task, fact-checking for her New York Times obituary. While the writer was a seasoned obituary writer, he knew nothing about Mom or experimental poetry, and in a conversation which started with him confirming some biographical details, he began to ask me some questions, such as, what is Bernadette's poetry about? And what was her most important poem? And in trying to answer this question for the paper of record and in a period of grieving and on a deadline, I started thinking about her poem, The Way to Keep Going in Antarctica, which many people had included in tributes to her after she died, and even credited for getting them through periods of hardship. So for many people, this seemed to be her most important poem. And it no doubt is one of her most important poems, but it's always been a bit strange to me and felt a bit distant even. And this is something we talked about a little bit earlier, in part because this poem expresses such raw emotion, which is sort of uncharacteristic for Bernadette in her poetry, which she even acknowledged in an intro to a reading in which she said about it, "It's a poem that I find deeply embarrassing to read because it is kind of, I don't know, emotional." Mom once told me it was about having a panic attack. So this past year, I find myself thinking about this poem and also thinking about Antarctica and her relationship to Antarctica, and then also my relationship to Antarctica and how it ended up shaping my own interests. And I keep wanting to reread all those books, but I've never really made the time. But I did reread Midwinter Day recently and Poems in the Golden Book of Words, both of which were written around the time that she wrote this poem, The Way to Keep Going in Antarctica. And I keep finding additional references to Antarctica and to these explorers, references that I didn't really pay much attention to earlier. And so this thought about Mom in Antarctica kept growing, but it also felt like a hard thing to do. I think we talked about earlier how she was often bemused at attempts of scholars and fellow poets to try and understand her poetry and her influences. And I could just hear her laughing about it as we heard her laughing about it earlier when we were doing just that. But that's actually a nice thing to conjure, as we also discussed. And in her laughter was always some enjoyment of all of the attention that it represented. And sharing the story about her sort of gifting me this Antarctic travel literature is a way to honor her generosity and her wonderfully expansive interests, which I feel like was revealed by Max's series of lists, and also her utopian ideal that reading and literature could solve every problem and even change the world. It also feels like I'm starting to develop a theory here, and here I hear her laughing again, which is that Antarctica actually seemed to have had a large influence on her work around the time that she wrote this poem and works like in Midwinter Day and the Poems in the Golden Book of Words. And this is a period of time when she was living in Western Massachusetts, a place that one scholar writing about the Antarctica poem has called that Antarctica of poetry in relation to her life and work. In the book Piece of Cake, she talks about when Lewis and her first moved to Massachusetts, they lived for a month in the town of Peru while they were waiting to move into their house in Worthington. And she writes about how we developed our idiosyncratic patterns then, me reading books about Antarctica long into the night. This was the summer of 1975. According to her close friend Peggy DeCourcy, who also shared a love of Antarctic literature, she had been a fan of this literature, along with Peggy and Grace, since the early 1960s. So it seems possible she was rereading some of these books again. References to these books appear several times in Midwinter Day, and in an interview with Fanny Howe, she talks about how Midwinter Day was partly inspired by the Antarctic explorers who had celebrations on Midwinter Day because the return of the light was such a hopeful time for them after living in complete darkness for so many months. And the literature of Antarctic exploration is filled with so many subjects and approaches to writing that Mom was really interested in and explored in her work. There's so much about elaborate celestial phenomenon, like the aurora borealis, which she was endlessly obsessed with, and endless descriptions of the weather, which she incorporated in so many of her poems, especially during this period of living in Western Massachusetts. The experience of deprivation and the extreme environment that these explorers were living in often led them into these altered states of consciousness also, which they write about in their journals or their letters home. They're also obsessed with food, and also, as she notes, moments of celebration. And then, of course, they are all obsessed with these methods of survival, the way to keep going, which in the poem she tells us to look at the very small things with your eyes and stay warm. Some scholars and writers have interpreted this poem about being isolated in Western Massachusetts. And while she may have been isolated in some ways and from the poetry scene in New York City, she also felt deeply at home here. I feel like there's more to say on this topic, but I want to end with my favorite passage from Midwinter Day, or one of them, that captures some of her connection to this place. Often someone walks in the door, and the first thing they say is, "Why do you live here, among these tight-ass Yankees in the cold?" And I say, "It's best it's me who does. I'm just as closed-mouthed, secretive, and stodgy as any Yankee in my way. I love to work and pay the hideous price of seeking infinite knowledge in this orphan place with its changing light, pure air, temperate extremes of weather's drama, beauty of the self-denial hills and sybarite trees, marshes, bogs, swamps, rocks, caves, and small towns, scenes of glacial happenings, still a part of the world. Everywhere a somewhat like expression as far as I can see, though I'm not the type who minds the cold. And in the past I've been told I'm just as cold and in winter dark and unchanging as these coldly charming hills, whose visages alarmed Nathaniel Hawthorne, a man, if we endeavor to speak thus, as nervous as I. Jesus, I don't mind the beauty of it all at all. Thank you.
That was great. Hi, I'm Philip Good. It's great to be here again. Lots of great memories, and thanks for creating some more memories. I guess I was Brandt's life partner for 37 odd years, and every once in a while she'd set up her typewriter and tell me it was time to do another collaboration. So I'd like to read the last one we wrote together. It became a nice little book, Subatomic Moss. I'll read the little note that the publisher put, Annabelle Lee, Vehicle Press. Typography for this lunar module was composed by the publisher on Bernadette Mayer Smith Corona Cornet Super 12 Chronomatic in the Poetry State Forest, East Nassau, New York, spring 2021. And Marie did the cover. You are my sunshine. Crafting a community, mystery sculpture, crafting an Emily Dickinson smile, denim pockets lined with velvet seahorses, belch, snow, grow up, make peace, plant trees. A color-coded alphabet forest, long-necked birds grilling rainbow trout, cigar-smoking turtles cross our path, build solar-powered wind-up watches. Where is the sun these days? Have we forgotten its mysterious warmth? The sun's a local. I think we should go to its marriage to the invisible goddess down the road. Fields of honey-flavored flowers, waterfalls of ice-cold sangria, fresh loaves of buttered French bread, orange blue sky with salmon clouds, or orange sky blue with salmon clouds, a real collective of soft lost parts, many common dolphins, countless grill, but there is no mouth to bring the food to. There is no sunshine in the deep ocean. Each whale pod has their own song. Ecology means different things to a smack of jellyfish riding the waves. Who smacked the jellyfish? Are they still as beautiful? If you wake up in the dark, are you singing? I sure hope fish don't have fights. Or eat the toes of naturalists who defoliate, as gale winds cause lizards to fly, as Florida mangroves float by, as singing butterflies sleep at night. After hearing the famous krill's lullaby, the minor poet's chaotic anthem, the impatient song of the major poets, the sounds of this year's riotous hurricane, a writer called thin, a writer's cult falling into some beam, slightly looking through the seaweed, weaving together words and dreams. An even thinner writer with no following at all didn't fall, but flew too close to the sunbeam. I saw the sunweed we dream we eat now. We demand more rays of the sun to catch in our poem and feed us. We'll bring it nearest to sea level and wish for the sea not to rise too high. Plenty of room for octopuses and fraternizing in the ocean, high rises for the nudibranches, social clubs for all the shrimp. Wandering past the underwater telescope, soft-boiled marine creatures look up at sailfish about to catch some air and shine bright in a fraction of a second before splash down toward a colony of crustaceans. I don't wander lonely as a cloud anymore. I know how to hit a moving target. I learned it from my friend, the other fish who fell into that crustacean's colony. Mutual aid is a wonderful thing in the wild. In public, it doesn't often occur. Meanwhile, shining in our colony, we put one foot in front of the other. You've been hanging out in the wrong places. Why, just the other day, as I mentioned, a fish taught me how to shoot at a moving target. And then humans contributed to our generator and a burner for the boiler. Teach a fish how to shoot a moving target, and I'll show you a fish that can feed for life. Figure out how to go fishing, and I'll show you where people put up no trespassing signs. Yeah, but they shouldn't. Property is robbery, as we all know. Besides, then, there'll be no fish for them. Let them eat supermarkets where the sun shines. Unseasonably wrong weather. There's so much weather. We read an article the other day that said the world's weather is changing. Xmas rain, snow, freezing fog, skies both gray and blue like the back porch filing cabinets under which a bird was looking for the exit. One bird flew out of the back porch to the snow-covered branches. Now no leaves as it should be, only a few days past midwinter day. The bird it zoomed like a curlicue through the solar system's evergreens onto the glittering tree of the memory of hyacinths, irises, hellebores, even snowdrops. As only a day before the bird flew, green wet ground appeared as flood warning alarms were announced, warm enough not to put another log on the fire. Which shall it be? Want some ice cream? Should we have a cookout? Or send the world to a lunatic asylum? We shall go in search of buffalo. We shall find the oldest trees. We will enlarge time and space all over the land. There's no time, but there is space for buffalo trees, but we can't go to the Corinth on our quarter acre. Properties theft all over the land. Science as opposed to religion, helping over harming, positive progress programs. Who will visit the bird feeder today? Science, Whippersnappers, the spirit of biodynamic shallots. To the bird feeder, birds will come. Some will bring human friends. More uncovered ground than yesterday. More gray sky like yesterday. Looking rainy without rain. Looking dreary without what migrated. Yes, less yawping about naked land. Altogether less gift giving while ski slopes explore, while human remains lie in mangers. While Indian ghost dancers dance, while explorer gift takers take, while locomotive timekeepers lose time and ruin stampeders. Someone should give everyone Linzer torts for this new Gregorian year. Plus, thank you for the blueberry jam we'll eat, while giving thanks to mountains for not being volcanoes today. Snacks to enjoy for the forests not burning down. Let's eat chocolate for not having a flood, and roast ducks for no droughts, cookies for clear skies. We'll toast with champagne to having no thoughts anywhere, and round the bend there is no more palpitating pandemic. But not before behavior changes. Grim headlines loom. Technology magically causes extinction. Rates rising rapidly out of control. We have underage drinking parties for monarch butterflies. All humans become extinct animals. Wolves take over the world. Trees no longer worry. Invasive species disappear. A bumper crop for pecans blooms. Technicolor seawater dispersed. We all move to a different house, eat seaweed and grow goldenrod and asters till we apprehend the nature of color, and every day is long. Is this the correction happening today? Will the wolf come out and play? Did you make a golem out of clay? Is everyone going to be in dismay? Hey, with you, I want to play today. Come over like a verb. Come out like a golem and we'll psst you into existence as a he, she, or they. Now we must write about climate change, global warming, greenhouse gases, melting Arctic ice, emission controls, world leaders' failures, and all that dreck. Okay, who owns the world? It's not that guy I want to play with, and it can't be me. I'm a female, whoever it is. Come to my office after class. What are you doing after the world is over? I'll meet you in the parallel universe, where it's spring all the time and will govern with clean energy. There'll be no Arctic drilling, no cars or smokestacks polluting, no fires or fossil fuels burning. To earth, air, fire, and water we say good morning. How many types of commercial planes are there? All different sizes and classes, private and public. Just say no to the jet class flying around willy-nilly. Say yes to the quiet azure airspace overhead. The sky predated airplanes as humans predated jet setters, as farms predated supermarkets. Let's leave everything alone for a while. Growing, everything needed. What do we have to do again? Make the old new again? Rid the world of the ridiculous? Let's coexist with the absurd, along with it will come free leaks. There's no such thing as progress, but you can take your clothes off. Don't forget to leave your mask on, and don't forget to leave your hat on. But it's either too hot or too cold, too dry or too wet, too early or too late. I'm too old and you're too young. Between is a different no way can find, whatever obligatory choice might we have. It is just the throw of the dice. Shall we try the I Ching? Write a meaningless play instead? Stage an experimental dance? Do the dice go ching when you throw them right? Does the impulse to create a play or dance itself make meaning? Let's dance and see. We can dance around the fig tree, growing out of control in the bathtub, climb to the top of the begonia, and pick the last flower off the fuchsia. In homage to the lives that will fill, restoring green plants to the tops of mountains and buildings, the bathtub will be ours, down here at the shores of fuchsia and begonia. We were born near those shores after the natives were displaced. Now people wish to save the park, save the water, save domestic weeds, but not the invasive species, but yes, the indigenous and African Americans, especially their burial grounds, especially all human beings, but not always monkeys, owls, butterflies, etc. What will it take to change the minds of the upside-down thinking people living in fear of all that is not the same and enjoy the moss instead of the fertilized grass? Moss is much softer, more intricate, so in the sun there'll be grass, but in the shade, mossed moss for every being. So if you come to think of it, let's save every being and thing. Thanks.
And here's my absolute favorite of my, I'm sorry to be doing that. It's called Yellow Orange. My dig was a sage ear. The mirror focuses on warm fog, wise marrow ram, queer fig, curious razor smear in a coffee mist. The war was a sexic sore for merry rims. As far as I come, the sow and the ram wager wish arrows. Various sim is a coxic rage. My soul, waxed samurai, swore on a swarm rock arrow. Come with a quick wag of veer, carry sex, ask ears frame, courser rim, game in a jock axe searing, and curry the same maize, in exotic, says the worm, in cocks, in jam. That's an example of what I was talking about today. When you write, you take notes or you write down words that seem interesting to you because they sound great or they're kind of, you get obsessed with them or whatever. And that's what I was doing at that time.
Let's put our hands together for all of our guests tonight. And one more time for Bernadette. Thank you all so much for being here on this occasion, and please stay and join us for a reception, and come back soon.